we're very, very lucky to have with us a man that I've realized is somewhat of a rock star in this industry. I've never heard him speak. He doesn't know who I am. I don't know who he is. So we're getting off on a good footing so far, which is a great thing. Exactly. So far, so good. I'm not going to do his big introduction now because this is not actually his talk that he's going to be doing. He'll be doing that after lunch. So we're going to be hearing from John a bit later, and I will introduce you to him properly. But ladies and gentlemen, to talk us through Professor Gay LaRue's talk, it gives me great pleasure to introduce onto the podium Professor John Smallwood, NMMU, Professor of Construction Management. He's going to be talking about professional ethics. Thanks, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I said to her, are you the program director? She said, whatever, you know, but I don't do program director stuff. It's known globally as Master of Ceremonies, just for the record. Yeah, that's point one. There we go. You got it, Bonke. Got it. Right, Professor Gay LaRue, she's actually a family friend, and she was one of the past heads of the Department of Quantity Surveying at the then University of Port Elizabeth, which was, along with the Port Elizabeth Technikon, created the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Professor Raymond Nakado, I'm delighted to advise, is also a past head of department of quantity surveying at the then University of Port Elizabeth. So, Ray, there are quite a number of you around. And just for the record, Professor Gay LaRue lectured me Quantities 1 in 1980. So I go back quite a long time. And I must just say that she was one of my role models and still is one of my role models. And I just mentioned certainly to Eric, but also to Ray, I just had a meeting with her the other day, a number of issues. And ethics is certainly one of her areas of specialization, and it's a very key area and a very special area. And before I actually commenced delivering the presentation, I distinctly remember an article published in, I think it was the Professional Builder, which was the then, and still is the Chartered Institute of Building's original journal magazine. Ethics. Is that a county in the UK? So this issue of ethics is a global issue. And yes, what is ethics? A code of conduct drafted by professionals to indicate the way they would like to act. Notice, like to act. And there we have a mobile phone going off, Madam Chairperson. If it were profitable, please notice that almost tongue-in-cheek inclusion there in the last line, if it were profitable. Frank Dane, quoted by Gerald Lieberman, 1983. What does professional mean? Before I address this slide, I have an issue with the professions. I refer to those traditional professions, architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, as the design team members. Because when you refer to them as professionals and not construction managers, and you exclude us rather, you're implying that we are not professional, which is possible, of course. But what does professional mean? Well, in 1793, some time ago, not as far back as 1652, which you know has resulted in some confusion in South Africa, but in 1793, it meant engaged in one of the four learned professions as distinct from amateurs. Please note amateurs. So now if you're not a professional, you could be an amateur. And they, of course, were medicine, divinity, law, and the military. Of course, the military was very big in that era and still is. And that's courtesy of the shorter Oxford Dictionary on historical principles. In street speak today, professional applies to anything and everything from hamburgers to hemorrhoids. Don't ask me what hemorrhoids are. Hopefully you don't have any. What are ethics? What is ethical behavior? What are professional ethics? Now, needless to say, these could be interpreted and, for that matter, viewed relatively. similar to the term excellence, which people often use relative to quality management. And of course, excellence is also relative. Professional ethics are doing the right thing, and of course, always. Not 90% of the time, 100% of the time. For the right reason, always. So yes, when a decision is made to prosecute someone, is it for the right reason? Okay. And then the first time, yes, I know how to make you laugh. You cannot separate politics from economics. Pestle, but we won't go to pestle today. But please note, always, always the first time. Similar to quality management, right the first time, 100% of the time. Why? Because we have an obligation, certainly in the capacity as built environment professionals, to use your term and the term that many use, to speak up and act with 100% integrity. Because if you do not speak up, it means, in a not so subtle manner, that you actually endorse the non-ethical behavior. So silence is not an option. So you need to buy a lot of whistles and become a whistleblower. Something doesn't look right. So if you're driving under a temporary bridge, spanning the M1 motorway in Josie, and you can't see certain interventions, that something doesn't look right. Anything doesn't smell right. I once viewed a video clip courtesy of YouTube, and it was entitled "The Smell of an Organization." Madam Chairperson, you can Google it, "The Smell of an Organization." When you walk onto construction sites, you can actually smell, not the marijuana smoke and the chemical toilets, Claire Deacon's favorite. But you should know what I mean. If you're a real professional, you'll smell it. Nothing sounds right, or it doesn't feel right. And there's a title, Gut Feeling. And gut feeling is actually a science, delegates, because it relies on past experience. And there's a title, you can Google that as well. Institutional ethics. The Built Environment Statutory Councils and their recognized voluntary associations, by virtue of an act and related acts of Parliament, are responsible for ethics. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, and there's a president here, and past president, and more. But these were established to protect the public. When a temporary bridge spanning the M1 motorway in Josie falls onto vehicles passing beneath, that's not protecting the public interest. When a construction worker or two is caught in an excavation collapse, that is not protecting the public interest, because they are also workers, that is, members of the public, and they have a family and more than likely partners who are members of the public. So we have major responsibilities as the statutory councils and our respective VAs. Improving institutional ethics in terms of the statutory councils, and you'll notice Professor Leroux has adopted a certain tack here, to use a sailing term. Firstly, to eliminate delays in dealing with the public. For example, following allegations of professional misconduct. Now, the mere fact that there was such professional misconduct is a cause for concern. And the council or councils concerned need to respond promptly, correctly, and decisively. I have a preference for decisively. Processing applications for statutory registration. This is a sensitive issue, I know. Some of you might have a sensitive nerve ending as we speak. But yes, obviously it includes RPL. And as Professor LaRue recorded, it appears, it's a wonderful word, allegedly appears, they're wonderful words. It appears that administrative delays in registering candidates are entrenched, pending full council approval. Of course, the Built Environment Statutory Councils have published their respective routes to registration, and some time back. And of course, accredited tertiary programs which serve as prerequisites to candidacy registration exist in terms of those routes, and of course in terms of the mandates of the respective Built Environment Councils. I don't want to dwell too long on accreditation. I do not want to hijack Professor LaRue's presentation. But yes, the whole issue of health and safety, which of course is an ethical issue, raises the question to what extent the extent construction H&S is addressed in tertiary education programs is interrogated during such accreditation visits. I certainly have questions for certain of those councils. Yes, the Built Environment Statutory Councils ideally have pools of experienced assessors, and I would hope those are not fire pools, which apparently is a new form of swimming pool, and that these are available to evaluate potential candidates' submissions to support their applications for statutory registration. I do not believe that Professor LaRue is criticizing, she's challenging, and I get challenged. I receive phone calls as a past councillor of the council of the SACPCMP. And of course, they need to recommend their candidacy registration or deferment, pending, of course, on their compliance with the respective council's requirements. These councils, of course, have no reason to delay for months until the following council plenary meeting and assesses recommendations, of course, of candidates' applications is available, either a case of approval or deferment. Have registrars, who are effectively the CEOs of the Built Environment Councils, who should be authorized to accept and assesses positive recommendation and sign and issue a candidate's registration certificate, backdated, please note the red font, to the date of receipt of the application by the registrar. And Gay poses the question, if not, why not? The statutory Built Environment Councils also have an obligation to eliminate administrative delays in support of potential candidates' career interests. And those delays, of course, can and do undermine prospects of employment promotion. I am very sensitive to the fact that there are many issues related to candidacy applications, among other, completeness of documentation. Never mind non-candidacy applications. And of course, all standing or working, note the tongue-in-cheek, their committees, including an executive committee, to deal with interim matters prior to ratification by their full councils, which possibly meet only twice per annum. So there is a challenge in terms of the process. It assesses recommendations regarding professional registration require council approval, which should also be backdated to the date on which the application was received by the registrar. And again, Gay poses the question, if not, why not? As she states, time is of the essence in career planning related to promotion opportunities. Voluntary associations, VAs, and Gay there records professional clubs, and they have been accused of being just that over the decades. I've been intimately involved over the decades. They, of course, should promote members' interests, which include access to CPD events. And Gay's big issue, free of charge. We had a meeting about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Gay and I did hour and a half to 2 hours. We discussed a range of issues, among other CPD. And recently, Gay presented an ethics-related presentation at a two-day construction health and safety summit. So we do exchange ideas. And in a sense, Gay was also challenging our VA and myself, because we need to do that. We need to reflect and deliberate. They also must provide prompt, fail-safe responses to members' requests for advice, free of charge. We could also ask the question, to what extent do these VAs collectively promote ethics in the built environment? Statutory councils recognize VAs based upon certain criteria, obviously. And these VAs should demonstrate, please note, superior. Note the emphasis there in blue font. Ethical leadership by example. Competence beyond question. Certainly in the administration of their members' interests. And courageous moral fiber in supporting their members in the hostile political and economic environments prevailing in South Africa. And notice that the double asterisk is a term used by Joan Bloom in the Oxford College training flyer, dated 12th of September 2016. Registered persons' ethics should be extra over personal and professional values. Now, this slide Gay has replicated a number of times, and for a number of reasons. The quantity surveyors within our community at present will know what extra over is. I distinctly remember Professor Raymond Mercado. Extra over ordinary brickwork for facing and pointing in blue plum rustic facing bricks. I've never, ever forgotten it. From 1980, Professor Mercado. That's Professor LaRue, your predecessor. She could drill anything into you, I promise you. But yes, no, I did enjoy quantities, and I achieved a distinction, fortunately. You must always remember as a student that you may become a member of staff somewhere, and you may report to your ex-professor. And so yes, always study with diligence at university. But the point Gay is making is extra over the law. Now, my classic, of course, because I specialize in health and safety, is the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So the Act requires if you have 10 or more people in a workplace, you must ensure that there's a registered first aider. So, right, you have 7 people in the workplace, you comply with the law, and you don't appoint a first aider, because you don't have to. But Errol the epileptic, working on the scaffolding at 10th floor level, decides to have a fit. And he wins the disco dancing competition as well. Now, you might say that's politically incorrect, but that's the point, folks. It's the same with the first aid box. If you have 5 or more people, you must have a first aid box. But what happens if you have 3 and you don't have a first aid box? And Calvin the carpenter cuts his finger and it bleeds. Now you don't have a first aid box, but you've complied with the law. So that's one of the issues addressed on that slide. Extra over the law. And of course, professionals. And I hope each and every one of you that you street smart, that you know there is no such thing as a fire pool. Okay. You love that, eh? That fire pool. I want to actually go visit it. I hope it's clean. And I wonder who's got the contract to clean it. But, yeah. Extra over the regulations. Now we have the construction regulations. And, of course, many of the regulations are implicit. They're not explicit. And, of course, those professionals, let's say the design disciplines, they're still battling to get to grips with designing for construction health and safety. And the fact that they specify a 1 meter long precast concrete curb and have absolutely no idea how much it weighs because their mother and father doesn't have to pick it up. Extra over regulations. Extra over codes. The height of balustrades, the width of staircases. even though we have SANS codes, we need to interrogate those codes. And yes, maybe you can just slip past your local fire department, and not through a payment of 1,000 Rand or live chickens, please. But maybe you can slip past your local fire department because you've just complied with the fire-related or fire prevention codes. But interrogate the venue. Look around the venue you're currently in. I wonder if any of you have. And extra over policies. And those policies range from quality to the environment, to health and safety, to HR, to affirmative action, whatever. Registered persons ethics. Now we're starting to make progress. Should prioritize legal compliance with open eyes and ears, sensitivity and awareness of risk, diligence in risk assessment and management, elimination of corrupt practices. Apparently, collusion is no longer the case in South African construction, so I'm advised. Taking chances, fudging, denying wrongdoing and covering up incompetence. Cronyism and nepotism. It's a disease in the Republic of South Africa. Blind eyes and deaf ears. Remember when you visit a construction site. Remember you providing a product for a client. Do registered persons have values which drive their ethical service? Moral fiber to support ethical practices? Because when the pressure's on or the temptation exists, do you buckle, to use a structural term? An obsession with protecting and maintaining squeaky clean reputations. We should all have such an obsession. We should have an exacting philosophy which includes such an obsession. Respect for ethical lifestyles and business dealings. Any fear of exposure as participants in bribery, scams, collusion, fraud, corruption related to cronyism and payback time. It's quite a list. Registered persons' ethics in business management, impartial, fair, and humane. Workers are not consumables. They are actually customers of management. Financial management, unashamed and clean. No qualified orders. If I had to receive a qualified audit, I think I'd commit suicide. It compromises your personal integrity and that of the organization. Discounting fees for professional services. Now, this is an ethical issue because when you discount fees, when you succumb to client pressure, you begin the journey down a dark alley because you should know that you cannot provide the desired level of service. Otherwise, that fee or fee structure would not have existed in the first instance. It wasn't sucked out of someone's thumb. I would hope not. And it's a big issue because over the years, more and more design team discipline members have spoken to me as a professional construction manager and related the pressure. And as a researcher, an active researcher in the built environment, I'm very sensitive to the challenges that the design disciplines, including quantity surveyors, are faced with. Administration, is it transparent? Is it top class? From a construction health and safety agent perspective, do you copy and paste piling into an H&S specification, or you omit to notice it in the principal contractor's H&S plan, and there's no piling on the project? Mentorship of candidates, and I know it's a challenge because I'm involved in that process. Are we diligent as mentors Do we share? Do we care? And does what we do constitute best practice or better practice? Validation of documents. Are we rigorously honest? And I've said to candidates, I'm not happy to use that term. And happy was one of the 7 dwarfs. I won't tell you the joke about Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, Leanne. Regulatory compliance, it must be impeccable, not 90%. Lack of institutional ethics, conferences and congresses. Why are conference registration fees exorbitant? Don't comment. How do fees relate to the take-home value of programs? Conference programs that provide no take-home value in terms of practical skills enhancement for registered professionals should not be marketed as CPD opportunities. Professor Nkado Erink, that's why I need to speak to you. Professor LaRue gave me a lecture, not in 1980, but 2 weeks ago. And she has a point, because I'm also very involved in conference organizing. And what is CPD actually intended to achieve? Possibly, I say to Gay, yes, tutorials, where registered persons actually undertake exercises. That's real CPD. And there's feedback provided. How do we know what you've derived from attending this conference? It's the same as health and safety induction in the workplace. If you do not review the inductees' understanding and appreciation, it hasn't actually happened. And then, of course, the failure of management happens, the accident, as you refer to. Conference organizers should identify and advertise presentations with specific CPD content and limit the allocation of CPD credits to only those presentations which actually have real-time value and content in terms of CPD. Exclude tea and lunch breaks from any CPD real-time value. Now, you can see Professor LaRue's a quantity surveyor, but I'm a construction manager. And I've promised when I'm on my deathbed, I will tell quantity surveyors, Professor Nkado, why there's always more hard rock in the final account than what they measured, but only on my deathbed. But you see, that's what Professor LaRue means in terms of fudging, folks. We need to be very careful what we do. And it's not only QSs such as Professor LaRue that interrogate these issues. Tea and lunch breaks are not networking opportunities. People talk garbage, trust me, myself included. Not CPD sessions. Validated attendance registers. And I know this council, because I deliver CPD events, we go to great pains to ensure that registers are signed. And Claire Deacon, Dr. Claire Deacon sitting there. But it's a challenge, I'll be honest. And we need to be 100% squeaky clean that we're not issuing CPD points. When Ronnie, the registered person, didn't actually attend both days, full attendance. They should be issued to delegates at the close of the CPD sessions, obviously. I mean, you don't sign for a load of bricks unless you've counted them. But I mean, you don't issue certificates upon arrival. You'll never see the delegate again. Professional ethics translate across all borders and are far more than just food for thought. Does this sound familiar? A sales executive for a large corporation which has a glowing mission statement, I mean, you've read all of them, stating its ethical business principles use devious tactics to secure a very lucrative contract. He bribed an official, posed as the chief procurement officer of the corporation, seduced and blackmailed a junior secretary, I wonder if it was a female, conspired to cause grievous bodily harm to a competitor, and organized a drunken orgy for potential clients. When his directors were informed about his tactics, they fired him. Hopefully they didn't attend the orgy. Sold off the contract to a major competitor, a huge profit, and shared the profit amongst themselves. About 3,466 years ago, a divine code of 10 ethics was engraved on 2 stone tablets. Since then, 35 million laws have been promulgated to encourage compliance with that 10-point code. I think one of them is thou shalt not steal. Why does integrity always seem impossible until it is done? Don't ever be ashamed to sell the family parrot to the town gossip. And I must just add, tongue-in-cheek, even if it has had its wings clipped, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
You see, you caught me with a peppermint in my mouth. I was just getting into that. Threw a peppermint in, sat back, and you ended. Come on, you've got to carry on. There's got to be more to, and that isn't even your presentation. That's when you know. Thank you so much for that. It was actually informative, and it actually brought a lot of questions into my mind. You talk about it. I seriously did have a peppermint in my mouth. I'm sorry. My mother taught me never to speak with my mouth full. I know. That she wasn't referring to peppermints. I think it was just food. You know, I honestly began to think about the fire pool and everything around the fire pool. The construction guys that actually did that, you've got to ask yourself, I mean, what did it do to the industry? Did it taint the construction industry at all? What do you think? With some of these bloated prices, I mean, let's be real. Let's be real. I mean, you know, you can't just blame one guy. There is a lot of people that need to be blamed for all of this. And I mean, when you break it down, and I was having a look, we all know the prices, but paving, 675,000 Rand for paving. You talk about the lighting, okay, 80,000 Rand for lighting. A fire truck garage. So there was, for the fire truck, the fire pool, and it also had its own garage, 365,000 Rand for that garage. The control room and visitors lounge, 7.5 million Rand. Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. And then that fire pool itself, the cost estimated between 2.8 million and 3.9 million Rand for that pool. So you have to ask yourself, and it very much so boils down to exactly what was Professor Gay was talking about, was the whole idea of integrity. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to give this bloated expectation, and I'm going to try and milk as much money as I possibly can, and it's all to the detriment of South Africans. So I think all of this ties in so well with exactly what Professor Somadore Fekeni was saying. We're all on a ship, and one by one, we're making holes in this ship called South Africa, and we're going to drown soon. And that's the reality, that if we're all honest and open with what we do, you know, that's pretty much so it is. I mean, I even heard how much the plug points cost, and it was astronomical. I mean, they were like 1,500 Rand per plug point in Nkandla. It is physically impossible. And who was putting these prices on? Anyway, I don't know. That's just me, and a lot of food for thought there. It really made me think about that.